priorities are very much in three different areas. One, around education, okay? We have some fantastic schools in Redbridge. You know, we're here at Isaac Newton Academy. You know, they do very, very well, and some fantastic teachers and the pupils work incredibly hard. But the thing is, across the whole of Redbridge, on average, and including in Ilford South, we faced around £250 per pupil cut in terms of budgets. That's a phenomenal amount of money. Parents being asked to, provide, not just money but resources and some pens, pencils to schools. That's just not acceptable. One of the key things I've also been in discussions with the Shadow Cabinet team for Education, the Shadow Cabinet Minister for Education, is to say that Labour are putting in place plans for what's called a National Education Service, essentially free education from cradle to grave. And that includes obviously removing the £55,000 tuition fee to enable anyone to go to university. But it also does a lot more in terms of further education, and I think that's really important. I want to see as many people obviously graduate with good degrees, but also to train up the next generation of engineers to actually have apprenticeships going into work which is well paid and long term, and that's something we're going to really focus on. So here in Ilford, for example, you've already got like the Crossrail Academy training up a generation of railway workers, not just with degrees but also for apprenticeships. We're going to look to expand that massively in terms of that type of provision. And so one of the discussions I've been having with the Shadow Education team, really if Labour win, is to say, could we potentially open for the first time a branch of a new public university right here in Ilford South? That'd be really, really important to me to keep pushing on that. The second thing, which I think is a huge issue here in this community, is around the NHS. King George Hospital, I've been involved since I was a local councillor back in 2010 to 2018 in campaigning to try and save the accident and emergency there. But saving the accident and emergency is not good enough on its own. We actually need to expand the services there. When you talk to the doctors and the nurses that work at King George, they're doing their utmost best, but the scale of the Conservative cuts to our NHS is crippling, the services. And so both there and at Queen's Hospital over the last few years, the CCQ reports have actually been pretty damning on the hospital's performance, and clearly it's about money and money needing to go back in. Labour obviously committing as well to get rid of the elements of privatisation that are creeping in. And we've seen just this week with the Tories, very clearly Labour's now got hold of a document that demonstrates beyond doubt that they are preparing to sell off the NHS to big US pharmaceutical and healthcare companies, privatising our much cherished NHS. That's totally unacceptable. The third priority for me is around pushing on housing. We clearly need more housing in Ilford South, but we need the right type of housing. I'm very, very keen that we move away from a focus on big luxury tower blocks and focus on building more council housing, more genuinely affordable social housing for families. Labour have committed as well to give more power to the Mayor of London to be able to control.
Sorry to interrupt you.
We ran such a positive and grassroots campaign, a huge campaign that engaged hundreds and hundreds of local party members. Not only that, we've now seen the biggest election campaign ever in Ilford South's history for the Labour Party. Just last weekend we had over 100 people turn up to go canvassing. So we've built a really powerful movement of local party members that's dwarfed anything the local party here was capable of building before that.
Now my
so
question
what I've
is
seen,
the
so
division within your party.
So what I've seen is that the vast majority of local councillors from Ilford South have been on board and have been out regularly campaigning. Look, everyone's desperate for change, everyone's desperate for a Labour government. Selection processes are always tricky, they're always difficult, but at the end of the day, I'm working very hard to reach out to people that didn't previously support me and ensure that everyone's involved, because we are working incredibly hard. I'm confident we're going to win. That means I'm going to be the next Labour MP here in Ilford South, and that means that people are wanting to get on board. And when they see the level of support we've had within the community here, it's been huge. I've actually got the local Gurdwara, SSLE, backing me very, very clearly. They backed me during this selection as well, getting involved. So the Sikh community has been solidly behind me. Over the last few months and even the last few weeks as well, visiting again all of the different mosques within Ilford South. The Muslim community hugely behind me. You know, very concerned that the Tories
But another Tory MP candidate.
I'm very confident actually, because I'm standing on my track record. I'm standing up my track record of opposing the war in Afghanistan, you know, campaigning against the war in Iraq, a long track record in East London, not just of kicking out the BNP, but taking, you know, issues like Islamophobia very seriously and actually campaigning on those issues. The Tory candidate, no one had ever heard of him before. He's got no track record of campaigning around Islamophobia. He's got no track record of campaigning around anti-racism. You know, his views on foreign policy are wildly out of step with the vast majority of the local Muslim community. So it's quite interesting. When we had a hustings just last week, his reception amongst local Muslim community was very, very hostile. And why? Because Boris Johnson is quite clearly a racist. He's an Islamophobe, and all of the things that he said on record, you know, attacking particularly Muslim women that wear the hijab, attacking black people, are an absolute disgrace. And what he was finding is people in his own community were saying...
But your leader is under pressure regarding the anti-Semitism. So how you'll overcome this situation from your constituency? And also the London Bridge attacker is from the ethnic minority community, especially in the Pakistani community, the Usman Khan. And how this attack will affect your constituency people not to divide just before the election?
Well, look, I'm working very, very hard to work with and win the support of the Jewish community. It's massively important to me. You know, I'm someone that's been involved in Ilford South in interfaith works. That means working with synagogues, means working with mosques, working with churches, reaching out to everybody. Look, you know, I'll be honest, the Labour Party hasn't got it right and didn't sort things out quickly enough, and that's caused an awful lot of pain and hurt to the Jewish community. But Jeremy Corbyn has apologised. He's been very clear in saying that we needed to sort out that process of getting rid of people who say anything that's anti-Semitic out of the Labour Party, because it's totally unacceptable. And I think that, you know, I recognise that's been slow, it's not been good enough, it's not been quick enough, but that is now, you know, something that we're moving on from, because we've, in the past, you know, not got it right, but we are now beginning to get it right. But it's going to be a slow process of rebuilding trust and winning hearts and minds in the Jewish community. Look, on the issue of the terrible attack that happened at London Bridge, you know, I actually work very, very near to there. I walk through that spot, you know, often on the way to work, and you know, my heart goes out to the families of all of those people that were hurt and those that were killed. I mean, it's absolutely terrible, and I think that there's a real question around why this person was on release and the government's responsibility for this person being released when they were clearly still a danger. And it makes, you know, for me, there's no coincidence amongst the fact that the privatisation and the cuts to the probation service have been massive. You know, you speak to anyone who works in a probation service, the privatisation of it has been a total disaster from start to end, so much more so that the government has obviously had to sort of rethink its position on further privatisation of the probation service. Why is that important? If we are not committed to rehabilitating people, yeah, then we are going to not ever move that issue forward. And look, I'll be clear, you know, the Muslim community, the Pakistani community, should not be held in any way responsible for the actions of individual people. You know, when Joe Cox was murdered by far-right terrorists, when, you know, Hope Not Hate, the anti-racism organisation, recently foiled a plot to murder another terrorist by white nationalists, we didn't turn around and say everyone in the white community or the English community is suddenly guilty of terrorism by association. And that's very much the approach I take. You know, most people in any community absolutely abhor terrorism and will take steps to do that.
Do you think this incident will not divide the community, especially the Pakistani dominated in Ilford South?
I think the Pakistani community in Ilford South are hugely behind me, to be honest. I think the amount of work that they're doing, whether it be local Pakistani-run businesses, whether it be, you know, people working at faith schools, whether it be, you know, local activists and local councillors who are of Pakistani origin, they're hugely behind me, and they are putting their shoulder to the wheel to campaign for me.
They have the Pakistani origin MP candidate from the Tory, and they will come to you.
Absolutely, because how could any Muslim vote for the Tories? Yeah, when they've got someone like me who's got a long track record of opposing racism, opposing Islamophobia, and taking a strong position on international issues of human rights and foreign policy.
My last question, especially for the Bangladeshi community, there is a huge your relationship with Bangladesh.
So, I mean, I'm really proud of the fact that on my campaign team, some of my key advisors are actually from the Bangladeshi community, and women as well from the Bangladeshi community. Look, I've been involved in East London politics for, more than 15, 16 years. And so, I've got links with people in Tower Hamlets, I've got links with people in Newham, I've got links with people in Barking, Dagenham, as well as here in Redbridge. So when I was running my selection campaign to become Labour's candidate, the Bangladeshi community turned out in their hundreds to support me. And in fact, this Friday evening, I've even got an event with some local Bangladeshi councillors and others from the Bangladeshi community that they're putting on so I can meet more people in the Bangladeshi community. The Bangladeshi community know me. They think that I'm someone that's been a genuine ally to them. They think that I understand the different factional politics even within the Bangladeshi community, which you have to understand if you're going to be a politician operating in East London, that you have to bring everyone on board with you, and I've worked really, really hard to do that.
So because Bangladesh is suffering the Rohingya issue internationally, so if you win, what would be your voice to the parliament to return back to the Rohingya, to the Myanmar, and especially on the election, just before one day election, the Aung San Suu Kyi is coming to The Hague to face the international court case. So what would be your role if you win?
Look, I'm someone that's throughout my life in politics and campaigning and grassroots activism championed human rights internationally and at home as well. So I'm really proud that in the Labour Party manifesto, one of the key things that's not been talked about, but I think is really important actually to people in the Bangladeshi community or any South Asian community, is the fact that we are going to put in place a review and an audit of the impact of the colonial empire on all the former colonies of that empire. Now, why is that important? Because we're going to tie that review to the Department for International Development budget and the 0.7% commitment to GDP that we're going to put back in place under a newly established wholly independent, Department for International Development, because at the moment it doesn't exist as a standalone government department. It's been merged into other departments, because that is about saying, look, we were responsible for creating, as Britain, many of the problems in many flashpoints across the world, whether that be, Myanmar, obviously that was formerly kind of like part of the British Empire, as was Bangladesh. And if we recognise that we had a problem originally in causing some of these issues, then actually we can use our foreign aid budget and that focus to actually begin to tackle some of these problems. Because there's no way, obviously, that we can have, people in the Rohingya community sent back to Myanmar to face, sort of persecution and death, but at the same time recognising that Bangladesh needs the support and the help to deal with the refugee crisis that is there. So I'm going to be a very strong voice on these issues with human rights as their focus.
Thank you very much indeed for your
Pleasure.
time.
Thank you very much.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you.